Thank you very much for showing up. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of lifecycle and the concept of user flow, which can be depicted in the user funnel in general. I stated it as follows. It's theoretically a lot to cover, but since we only have like 20-something minutes, I'm going to rush through it, and it will be a little bit more high level. But the major importance for this talk from my side today is really to give you an insight of especially how we developed it at BigPoint to have this analytical approach towards game design, production, everything. So if there are any questions at the end, feel free to buzz it. The talk looks as follows. I'm going to start with the intro, talk a little bit about me, what I've been doing, then the prerequisites, the business model, I think pretty straightforward. You can skip through that quite easily. And then some underlying concepts that are important if you really want to understand the game's lifecycle concept and to work on the funnel concept, which include, I subsum them as an analytical approach in general. Then we come to the lifecycle, give you some cases, how the real world should look like and how it really looks like, and take a little bit of an idea of some not so successful products and some successful products, and then move over to the user flow and put some KPIs behind that. But please bear in mind, it's all going to be a little bit of high level because we can't dive deep into it very, very much because we only have half an hour. But I'm very happy to talk about it at a later stage. So let's start with the intro. I started in '79, some years ago, and the major part of my career, my twin brother and I have been self-employed. So we had a few startups, mainly in the finance area and a little bit of tech. And there was one company that we started working for, the only company ever we worked for, and that was BigPoint. It was a tremendous journey. I think everyone, Heiko being here on the panel this morning, and everyone knows around here what happened in the past 5 years. So it was great being part of building this company. But after 5 years, our entrepreneurial heart went like, okay, we got to do our own stuff, and we're in the process of forming a little mobile startup. And to work on that, you'll hear a lot more about that next year, and it's called Appflag. Please do not forget about the L in the word. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the prerequisites, and I utilize some of the older BigPoint slides because they depict the business model quite well. First of all, what you see here is on your left side, we got the subscription model. And it's a good one, everyone knows about it, but the not so optimal aspect of it is that you actually, if you set a price, let's say 10 euros, what you do cut out the people that are not willing to invest 10 euros, only 5 or 1 or 2 euros, they're not able to play your game. That's in terms of active users, but in terms of revenue, and that's what a lot of people do forget about it, is they do cut out the people that are willing to invest a lot more. And running BigPoint for 5 years together with the rest of the team, we knew that especially the people in the upper bit are very, very profitable, and these are your actual avatar bringers. So you have to be careful to take care of that. The beauty with the free-to-play model is what you basically do, you do align your business model to the willingness of the user to pay. So a lot of people will never ever pay, but they will play. And there's some people that would invest a lot of money into it that are just the top core, the top 5, top 3, whatever % of users, and this can be quite profitable. But in general, what you do with the business model is let them pay whatever they want to, but what are the basics that you want them to pay for? And these are BigPoint slides still, but I think they're quite direct of showing you what we actually sold. We sold time. So if people really, or time shortened, so if people really had to play something and didn't want to grind their way through, we said, okay, invest a little bit and you'll manage it a little bit faster. Or I think this is a very interesting way of showing convenience. So if you can have this little baby shut up during night and be up to date in the morning, pay a little bit. And that's what we're doing in most of our games. So this basically is the business model. I think everyone understands that. But the more interesting aspect is I subsummed all of these different aspects as an analytical approach. So I put them in here because it's quite important to have, once you engage the user lifecycle and the user flow concepts, you got to have the infrastructure ready. And what that means, I'm going to show you now, because this looks pretty straightforward, but since I know most of our companies, you do need to have the human infrastructure and the technical infrastructure. So if you have, and most companies, gaming companies at the moment, they have like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 analytics guys, despite the fact that they make, I don't know, 10 or 100 million revenues, and they don't really pay too much attention. Everyone says, oh yeah, it's important that we do a business intelligence or whatever the buzzword is, but you actually don't have people that spend 100% of the time on that. So what I see in a lot of companies, especially in the past month doing a little bit of consulting on the side, is that you see, oh yes, the analytics function is part of the CFO area, wrong. Or the analytics function is part of the marketing area. You got a guy taking care of marketing campaigns, and on the side should really take care of the analytics bit. It doesn't work like that. And apart from that, even if you have the human infrastructure, you got to have the technical infrastructure. And the technical infrastructure is something that can be very, very challenging because there's so much you can track. This is just to provide a little bit of an example. If you are able to set up an analysis function, there are so many different stakeholders. And that's what we experienced at BigPoint, because once we institutionalized this analytical approach and people really got to see the value in this department, there were, I mean, of course, us as management, but everyone really wanted to have numbers to support the decisions. Because at the end, all of this is just to reduce complexity, to reduce intransparency, to have more engaged people, and as a consequence, make more money. This is just an example of how the overall analysis function could look like. And you see, if you have just 2 marketing guys that do 25% of analysis work, there's no way that they can really take care of all of these different aspects. And unfortunately, I can't dive deep into it because every aspect here could be an own talk. So what you basically need is 2 things. You need to have a technical infrastructure. If you're not able to have this in-house, I mean, there are a lot of great companies like Games Analytics, Contagion, or whoever there is that could provide you and support you, but you got to have at least some internal lobbying and people that really could help you to do that internally. And overall, it got to be a holistic approach for overall of your company because it could really boost your revenues. Another very important aspect is the so-called analytical creativity. It sounds a little bit esoteric or whatever you call that, but the guiding principle to that is that when my brother and I headed the production at BigPoint, we told our producers and game designers, build whatever you want. I don't care if it's a Hello Kitty or gray and white or whatever update, but please base it on some numbers. Because the main reason is, if you and maybe your 20 or 30-man team spends a month or 2 on something, and the community will not like it, it will not make money, we're in kind of a deep shit and trouble. So base it on something, base it on numbers to support you. And that's basically the concept behind it. Have something you base it on. But do not let the numbers overrule creativity. It's just a supportive function in general. That's one principle. The other principle is so-called iterative innovation. And the people that have been in the industry a little bit longer, like 2, 3, 4 years, and know what we, especially BigPoint, did with Poisonville, know that this concept failed tremendously because we tried to innovate on more than 1 or 2 fronts. We came from the 2D browser space, and we tried to do a shooter in 3D with a front-end engine that we had no idea about and did not know how to monetize. So build on what you know, focus on it, and then from time to time innovate. If you got 10 projects, have 2 projects that are really out there, that are reinventing the wheel, but the other projects be a little bit more conservative. Because if you've already built a successful game, do not try to really reinvent the wheel. Another very important aspect that I think the industry is just now understanding or trying to understand is as easy as cohorts. It basically goes down to the concept of segmenting. So think in segments, think in cohorts. And there could be cohorts, I mean, it's very straightforward, the concept, but the application to the real world is a lot more complex. I mean, geography. A Turkish user behaves a lot different than a German user. And on the other side, traffic sources. Just because you have people coming in, I mean, it was very interesting in the panel before here, seeing, oh yeah, it all comes from the App Store. It's just one type of user that goes in. I think it's a lot more fragmented that we've seen. And people from media partners or from TV stations, users, they do behave a lot differently than, for example, viral traffic. And especially when you think about the user funnel of how they behave within the game or the life cycle, it will have a different consequence. But I will come to that in a minute. Just as straightforward as this. This is a life cycle just out of the textbook. Put it on the slides because this is how it looks like. But the real money is going to be made if you're able to prolong this maturity phase. And this maturity phase for some of the games like Sea Fight, Dark Orbit, Ultima Online, the World of Warcraft things, people are able to stretch this maturity phase. And that's why I asked earlier, class casting, how loyal the users are. But if you're able to stretch this maturity phase over a longer period, you'll be making a lot of money. But the KPIs and the management you put behind this type of phase is totally different than in the decline or in the growth phase. But all can be very profitable. But I'll come to that. So this is how the real world should look like. And you want everything over time to grow and be a lot more successful. Unfortunately, this is how most of the games, since we're hindered from business, will look like. So despite the fact that they start sharply and grow, they might fall down as well. We internally called it the KPIs don't hold. So if you have a cohort of viral traffic, I don't know, 10,000 users first month, and you think, oh, great, you have a good conversion, good ARPU and everything, good engagement, it's great. Buy a lot more marketing or be featured on the in the App Store and everything. So if you really open the lever and see a lot of traffic coming in and the engagement goes down and everything, then it can go down again. So let me come to some cases. This is one big point case as well. We've already had this up on a lot of conferences, so I'm not really showing something new, but in different contexts. What's important about here is this time scale. So we launched the game in December 2010, and we kind of killed it not even a year later, because what we did is we had it growing to nearly 100,000 actives within 2-3 months, but then the KPIs did not hold, and it killed. It kind of looks a little bit like a normal life cycle, but instead of a life cycle like this, it's just like this. This kind of looks the same, but it's a very successful game. And the difference is, let me just go back once. Here you see 80,000 users. Here you see 80 million users. And it's not 1 year, but it's 3 years. So this is a life cycle that works quite well. And this is just for active users. But if you compare that, how does it look at in terms of earning the money? The life cycle can look a lot differently. So if you have games like Farmville, some of the Big Point games, some of the GameForge games, whatever online games that are around there for a few years, the revenue distribution doesn't look like this, but it looks a lot more like this. So have a look on the green slide, like the green curve, which is more the active users, and then have a one on the blue one, where you see that even though you're at a later stage in your life cycle, you're able to hold the revenues or even grow the revenues. And that is because your thinking about the life cycle significantly changes. And like I said earlier, the different cohorts, this is just one example of cohorts I'm going to talk you through, and I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a cohort of traffic, which can be broken down into paid and unpaid users. Well, you could pay beforehand or after, and in terms of unpaid, of course, you got all the viral traffic. So I know they're not good looking, these slides, but bear with me. What you see here, you can buy the user up front, so you have some performance-based marketing. I don't know if you go like Google keywords and all that stuff, pretty straightforward. Or you do partner up with media partners and have something on a rev share basis. All of these users that come there behave totally different. That's something you got to keep in mind when building the funnel. So let's come to the funnel. And it's another ugly slide, but it's about the message. So don't be alarmed. The main concept behind this is that you got to be able, with your human and technical infrastructure, to track the different steps of the funnel. And the funnel, the principle or the concept of the funnel basically means that there are some users that are not even part of your network until they churn out and you try to get them in. But how do they behave in these different steps? And I just put some example steps in here. So you have the view, register, first time active, first payment, next payment, then they churn to pay, and someday they will churn to be active. You could reactivate them all over the time, but you got to be aware that in the process of view, you got to be thinking of what you can optimize in terms of every step, or in the step of how active they are. And that's just one level of complexity. Now think about it, adding the cohort thing. So you could do that for every traffic channel. And now think of a Turkish media partner user in one of your games, and so on and so on. So this can become very, very complex, even though the concept looks quite easy, but it can be very, very complex because the user experience could be something different for every cohort. And that's something that, especially at BigPoint, we've been working and we're spending a lot of time on. But once you have identified these different steps, and at BigPoint, we put 400 to 600 KPIs, key performance indicators, behind these different steps in total, and try to measure everything to get a lot more transparency. Once you do that, you will be able, and this is just an example of different KPIs that are just part of the measuring the active users, how they behave, how they are. Once you do that, you will be able to combine this concept of user flow to the concept or to the principle of the life cycle. And that's what really becomes quite interesting if you know in which stage of life cycle your game is. And now I'm going to talk you a little bit through the different stages of how we had a look, especially in each of our games, in terms of which stage of the life cycle they are. We basically broke it down into 3 different tiers, to say. So first one was the growth. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but we totally, at the moment, leave out the production bit because this is basically about a live product, a live service that's to be run. So first of all, you get the introduction and growth phase. You have a lot of people joining in. Then you get the maturity phase, which I just talked in. And then you get the decline phase. What I basically did here is, just as an example again, is how does the KPI focus changes? How does the market focus changes? Or what type of updates you have to develop in each stage, and especially in terms of marketing spending and everything. So what you see here, quite easy. The main goal in this phase is really to learn from your users, learn your game, because whatever you write down beforehand, once you put it out, what we've seen, sometimes it behaves totally different. Tweak and adapt. So focus on the growing of the game, of making a game that's engaging. And there we already come to the first KPIs, is, as we see the highlighted ones here, it's about conversion. It's not pay conversion, but keeping the users in the game, letting them become engaged. I used to do this on conference, and the former PR department didn't want me to do that because it was like, become addicted. It's basically this. Get the people in, let them play, let them love it. But since you still have to learn a lot, maybe do not focus on your core market. Because if you burn your core market with a product that might be 80% ready but not 100%, especially the viral users are not very much forgiving. So if you have an international audience, benchmark different markets that you already know. So maybe take a high ARPU, good conversion market like Netherlands or somewhere North Europe, and benchmark it and have another market which you already know, like a low converting, less loyal market like, I don't know, Turkey, Hungary, or Poland. And once you've mastered or perfected the game in these markets, have another rollout in the next phase. Focus really is on growth, getting the people in, and build around the core loop. That's very important that we've seen is there's so many things you want to do once the game is out. Really focus, 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 because if you are able to keep the users in at the first stage, there's so much more content and stuff you can go on and build at a later stage. In terms of marketing spendings, no hard return on invest goals should be there. I mean, you should not be throwing out money, but if you are able to achieve a good core loop, you will be making money after you have perfected that. But in this period, especially in the beginning, the marketing spendings will be a lot higher than the revenues. But after, just like you see on the lower right side, after at the end of the stage, marketing and and revenues should kind of level out. If not, you might have this panorama thing that the KPIs don't hold. The next thing we see here is the maturity phase, and there the main goal really is to expand and potentially refactor your game, rework your game, earn, and what's very important, reinvest. Reinvest in terms of resources, of headcount, of everything, because it's a service. Just like Michael Schade said earlier, it's not that you have a game and you put it out and that's it, but you have to constantly work on it over a longer period. Even on mobile, it's not like that. And in the web-based space, if you think you're done after pushing it out, having your gold master, it doesn't work like that. So the KPI focus have switched from just getting the user engaged to now you already have the users and they like your game, well, start making money with them and getting engaged a lot more. So think in cohorts, like I said earlier, build something for every cohort and start upselling them. I mean, the people that are willing to invest 2 years or 3 years or 10 years, they might be willing to invest 10, 30, or 100, or even 1,000 over a period of time. So that's one thing. And in terms of market, go full-fledged. Go all the way. If you have a product that works, if you have a money printing machine, keep applying it to every possible market. And in terms of pipeline update, focus on really growing the game. Make a big game. I mean, it's like the World of Warcraft, I don't know, Panda thing or whatever you can come up with, because keep the people engaged and be playing it. And comparing the marketing spendings, they should be significantly lower. So you will not be able to operate a game where you have, I don't know, 70% of revenues will be reinvested as marketing. If you do that, it's not going to be a success, because then it will be dead if you turn off the marketing. Now we come to the last phase, which is a decline phase, which can be very, very profitable if you do it right. Because a lot of companies neglect this phase. They just kill a product. But what we did at Big Point, we put a lot of product into the so-called maintenance mode. We have games that have not been touched, apart from a happy hour or an event trigger, not been touched for 2 years, and still pulling a lot of money with no team on it, no one absolutely on it. So the main goal is to manage and prolong the game, and as I put it down, that milk the cow, just make money out of it. The main focus here is reduce churn. Try to keep them in as long as possible. It's just a little bit like an old car. As long as it runs, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. Because it does its job and can be very profitable. Focus on viable markets. So if you have community management in, I don't know, we sometimes said it in 30 different languages, focus on the core markets. People will be okay to just answer in English, even though it's not their native language. Manage the decline, like I said. And in terms of revenues, they're slowly declining. What we've seen is somewhere, it really depends on the type of game, but between 15 and 25, 30% per year that we are losing. So if server costs are not too high, it can be profitable over a long period. And what's important is do not waste marketing money. The marketing money you save here should be reinvested in some of your stars you have there. So the overall idea here is that I just wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding that despite the fact that it's one game and it's one user playing it, it actually is a service, and the stage of life cycle a game is in really has an impact of how you should look at it. So first of all, you got to be able to measure it. You got to be able to have the infrastructure in place, which is a challenge in itself with a lot of companies. And what I've seen in the past, a lot of companies do not really realize or recognize that there's so much uplift potential of doing it, because they're happy with the revenues they have, but they do not understand that if they have a cohort approach, for example, they could be saving a lot of money, and they could be on the other side making a lot more money. So it's very important that you do have the infrastructure in place. And if you're not able to do that on your own because you're too small, you don't have the viable size of, I don't know, 700, 800 people in the company, consult people that already done it and could help you with it, because it will eventually pay off. But once you've mastered the infrastructure, really work with it. Work with the user flow concept on one side and work with the lifecycle concept on the other side. And the games that grow and fall down quite fast, kill them. It's okay to fail. I mean, under my brother and my tenure, I think we've released 30-something games, and not 30-something games were all million sellers. So it is a hit-driven business. No matter how good you are, you will fail and have the guts to fail and kill it and move on and learn from it and just have the next game out there, but know when and what and how, and have the KPIs or the numbers, the metadata to support you. That's basically the core knowledge about it. Thank you very much. Pretty fast.